June 6, 1944, 0630 hours. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The water was chest deep and cold enough to stop a man's heart. Ezra Thornton Briggs waded forward through the surf, each step a battle against the weight pulling him down. 70 pounds of equipment, rifle held high, machine gun fire tore through the waves around him, creating white geysers in the gray morning light. Men were dying in the water. Men were dying on the sand. The beach ahead was a killing ground, and every instinct in Ezra's body screamed to turn back, to dive under, to survive. But Ezra Briggs had not come to Normandy to survive. He was 34 years old, 230 pounds on a 5'9" frame. The heaviest man in his company. The man they called too fat for combat. The man his commanding officer had recommended for supply duties, for desk work, for anything except the frontline infantry assignment he now held. They had looked at his weight on medical charts and decided he was a liability. They had seen 230 pounds and concluded he would slow down his unit, get men killed, become a casualty himself within hours of hitting the beach. Over the next 18 hours, from 0630 on June 6 through midnight, Ezra Thornton Briggs would kill 76 German soldiers, more than any other American soldier killed on D-Day. The fat sergeant would become the deadliest man on Omaha Beach. And 7 days later, sitting in a tent behind the lines, he would face a court of inquiry asking a single question. Was 76 kills excessive? Could one man justifiably kill that many enemy combatants in 18 hours, or had Sergeant Briggs violated the rules of engagement through what the brass called disproportionate use of lethal force? The same officers who had called him too fat to fight would question whether he had fought too well. But that inquiry was still a week away. Right now, in the cold water off Omaha Beach, Ezra Briggs was just trying to reach the sand alive. The story of how a Tennessee sharecropper became the most lethal soldier on D-Day begins 14 years earlier, 3,000 miles away, in a place where missing a single shot meant his family went hungry. Childhood, the necessity of precision. Rowan County, Tennessee. Spring 1920. Ezra Thornton Briggs was 10 years old the first time he understood that his father's life was measured in dollars and debt. $380. That was what Clayton Briggs owed to the landowner whose fields the family worked. Sharecroppers did not own land. They worked it on credit, took their portion of the harvest, paid their debts, and hoped something remained. Most years, nothing remained. The Briggs family lived in a 2-room cabin at the edge of a cotton field. Clayton worked the crops. Ezra's mother, Ruth, took in washing from families in town when she was well enough, which was not often. 3 younger siblings needed feeding. The debt to the landowner grew each year like kudzu, choking everything else out. Ezra learned early that every resource mattered. Every penny, every meal, every mistake had a cost the family could not afford. It was his father who taught him to shoot. Not for sport, not for pleasure, for survival. Clayton owned a single-shot rifle, a battered Springfield, that had belonged to his own father. The rifle was one of 3 valuable things the family possessed. The other 2 were a mule and a cast-iron stove. On Ezra's 10th birthday, his father took him into the woods behind the cotton fields and handed him the rifle. "Shells cost money we don't have," Clayton said, "so you learn to make every shot count. Miss and we wasted a shell. Miss enough and we can't buy more. You understand?" Ezra understood. His father had made an arrangement with the landowner. 15 cents for every rabbit Ezra brought in, 50 cents for every deer. The landowner's wife wanted game for her table, and she would pay for it, deducted from the debt. 15 cents, 50 cents, numbers that meant the difference between eating and going hungry. "You miss a rabbit," Clayton said. "Family don't eat rabbit that week. You miss a deer, we lost 50 cents we needed for flour. So you don't miss, you hear me, boy?" Ezra heard. From age 10 to age 24, Ezra Briggs hunted, not for sport, for economic necessity, for survival, for the slow, painful reduction of his father's debt. 14 years in the Tennessee woods. 14 years learning that precision was not optional, that missing meant consequences, that every shot had to count because his family could not afford mistakes. He kept careful records the way poor people do when resources are scarce. 843 animals killed over 14 years, 618 rabbits, 192 squirrels, 33 deer, average range 320 yards. In 14 years of hunting to feed his family, Ezra Briggs missed fewer than 40 shots, less than 5%, because missing meant his family went hungry, and Ezra learned not to miss. The squirrels were hardest. 8 inches long, sitting in trees 300 yards away. Small targets requiring absolute precision. Ezra would wait for hours controlling his breathing, accounting for wind, for the slight tremor in his hands, for the way the tree branch swayed. One shot, one shell, one chance. He learned to read wind by watching leaves, learned to judge distance by the size of the target in his sight picture, learned to control his heartbeat to squeeze the trigger between pulses to make his body still in the moment of firing. Not because he loved shooting, because his family needed to eat. His longest shot came in winter of 1933. The family had gone 4 days without meat. His mother was sick. His youngest sister, Rebecca, was crying from hunger. The debt had grown to $412. Ezra tracked a deer through snow for 6 hours. When he finally found it, the animal was 520 yards away, feeding in a clearing. An impossible shot with a battered Springfield rifle and iron sights. Most hunters would not even attempt it. Ezra had one shell left. The family had no money for more. He laid prone in the snow, calculated the drop at 500 yards, accounted for the wind moving left to right, waited for his heartbeat to slow, held his breath, squeezed. The deer dropped. Ezra carried it home through the snow, 90 pounds of meat that would feed his family for 2 weeks. His father said nothing, just nodded. The landowner's wife paid 50 cents deducted from the debt. That night, for the first time in 4 days, the family ate. This was the training that would matter on Omaha Beach, not the Army's rifle ranges, not the tactical courses. 14 years of making impossible shots under pressure because failure meant real consequences. The skill transfer was simple mathematics. An 8-inch squirrel at 300 yards was harder than an 18-inch German helmet at 400 yards. A 520-yard deer was harder than a 400-yard enemy soldier. The targets in France would be bigger, the stakes would be higher, but the fundamental requirement remained the same: precision under pressure. One shot, one kill, no mistakes. Ezra's weight came from the same source as his shooting skill: labor. From age 8, he picked cotton alongside his father. 90-pound sacks carried from dawn to dusk. By his teenage years, Ezra could carry 2 sacks, 180 pounds, and work a 12-hour day without stopping. The weight was not fat. It was muscle built from necessity. Functional strength developed through years of hard labor. By 1935, when Ezra was 25, his hunting and his cotton work had reduced his father's debt to $140. Not eliminated, but reduced. Manageable. The family would survive. Clayton Briggs, a man who rarely showed emotion, put his hand on his son's shoulder that year and said 6 words: "You kept us alive, Sichun. Remember that." Ezra would remember. He would remember on Omaha Beach when officers questioned his capability. He would remember when the weight charts said he was unfit. He would remember that his strength came from keeping his family alive through 14 years of precision and labor. But first, he would have to convince the United States Army that a 230-pound sharecropper from Tennessee belonged in combat. Training the Weight of Judgment, December 8, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor. Ezra Briggs walked into the Army recruiting station in Johnson City, Tennessee. He was 31 years old. He weighed 230 pounds. He had decided to enlist. The recruiting sergeant looked at him across the desk with the expression of a man who had already made his decision. "Step on the scale," the sergeant said. Ezra stepped on the scale. The needle swung to 230. The sergeant consulted a chart, ran his finger down the height column to 5'9", then across to the weight column. Maximum allowable weight for that height, 175 pounds. "You're 55 pounds over the limit," the sergeant said. "We can't take you." Ezra had expected this. He had known the weight would be a problem, but he had also known something the sergeant did not know. "I can carry equipment," Ezra said. "I've carried 90-pound cotton sacks 12 hours a day for 20 years. I can shoot. Hunted 14 years. I'm strong. I can do the work." The sergeant looked at him, looked at the chart, looked back at Ezra. "The chart says you're unfit. Overweight by regulation standards, health risk, mobility risk, combat liability." "The chart doesn't know what I can do," Ezra said. The sergeant drummed his fingers on the desk. The truth was, the Army needed men, needed them badly after Pearl Harbor. The sergeant had quotas to fill, and this big Tennessee farmer seemed serious, seemed capable, seemed like he might actually be able to handle the physical requirements despite the weight. "I can give you a waiver," the sergeant finally said, "but it comes with a recommendation. Non-combat assignment, supply, administration, something where the weight won't matter as much." "I want combat infantry," Ezra said. Son, you're asking me to waive you in 55 pounds over the limit and assign you to the hardest physical duty in the Army. Can't do both. Ezra looked at the sergeant for a long moment. Then he nodded. A waiver was enough. He would prove himself later. I'll take the waiver, Ezra said. And that was how Ezra Thornton Briggs entered the United States Army with a note in his file recommending assignment to non-combat duties due to excessive weight. Camp Shelby, Mississippi, March 1943. The mockery started on day one. Ezra stepped off the transport truck with 60 other recruits, all of them young men in their late teens and early 20s, most of them weighing between 150 and 170 pounds. Ezra, at 32 and 230 pounds, stood out immediately. Look at that, someone said. They taking cooks for infantry now. Laughter. Tubby, another voice called, Hey, Tubby, you sure you're in the right line? More laughter. Ezra said nothing. He had been poor his entire life. He had learned long ago that poor people do not waste energy on responses that change nothing. The drill instructor, a lean sergeant named Morrison, walked down the line of recruits, stopped in front of Ezra, looked him up and down. Name, Morrison said. Ezra Briggs, Sergeant. You're the fattest recruit I've seen in 6 years, Morrison said. You going to be able to keep up, Briggs? Yes, Sergeant. We'll see about that, Morrison said and moved on. The first physical training session proved Morrison right to be skeptical. The recruits ran 2 miles in full gear. Ezra finished last 3 minutes behind the next slowest runner. Morrison made him run 2 additional miles. Fat boys run extra, Morrison said, until you're not fat anymore. The obstacle course was worse. Ezra's weight made wall climbs difficult, made rope climbs nearly impossible. He struggled through the course, finishing last again while other recruits watched and laughed. But there were things Ezra could do that the lighter recruits could not. When the company marched 20 miles carrying full-pack 70 pounds of equipment, Ezra finished in the middle of the formation. Not first, but not last. His years carrying cotton sacks meant 70 pounds felt manageable. Other recruits, lighter and faster on the obstacle course, fell out of the march with exhaustion. When the company trained on the rifle range, Ezra qualified expert with the M1 Garand. 198 out of 200 possible points, the highest score in his company. Morrison noted it in his records, but still wrote physical fitness concerns due to excessive weight. Recommend reassignment to duties requiring less mobility. The recommendation followed Ezra through training. Every officer who reviewed his file saw the weight notation. Every evaluation mentioned it. Ezra Briggs could shoot, could march, could handle the tactical requirements. But he was too fat for combat. In September 1943, the 29th Infantry Division deployed to England to prepare for the invasion of France. Ezra went with Company D, 116th Infantry Regiment. His commanding officer was Lieutenant Garrett Ashford, 28 years old, graduate of Virginia Military Institute. Lean fit the physical ideal of what an infantry officer should be. Ashford looked at Ezra's file and made his decision immediately. You're the fattest soldier in this company, Briggs, Ashford said. Probably the fattest soldier in the battalion. That makes you a liability. I'm recommending your transfer to supply duties. Sir, I qualified expert marksman, Ezra said. I can handle the physical requirements. The chart says you can't, Ashford said. You're 65 pounds over the maximum allowable weight. You'll slow down the company. You'll become a casualty. Better to use you where your weight won't get other men killed. Ezra wanted to explain, wanted to tell Ashford about 14 years in the Tennessee woods, about 843 kills at an average range of 320 yards, about carrying 90-pound sacks through 12-hour days. But poor people learn that explaining rarely changes outcomes. Yes, sir, Ezra said. The transfer recommendation went up the chain of command. But before it could be processed, the division medical officer intervened. Major Dr. Silas Whitmore was 48 years old, a career Army doctor who had seen enough soldiers to know that physical standards did not always correlate with capability. Whitmore reviewed Ezra's file. Then he called Ezra into his office. Sergeant Briggs, Whitmore said, your file says you're unfit due to weight. Your performance records say otherwise. Expert marksman, completed every march. Adequate on all physical tests except timed runs. What's your story? Ezra told him. Tennessee sharecropper, 14 years hunting, cotton work from age 8, strength from labor, not from training. Whitmore listened. Then he conducted his own examination. Measured Ezra's body composition, tested his cardiovascular fitness, checked his endurance. You're the strongest man I've tested in 6 months, Whitmore said. You carry more muscle mass than any soldier in this battalion, but the regulations are clear. You're overweight by chart standards. I can't change that. No, sir, Ezra said, but I can decline to recommend your transfer, Whitmore said. If Lieutenant Ashford wants you reassigned, he'll have to override a medical officer's assessment, and I'm going to assess that despite your weight, you are fit for combat duty. Ezra stayed with Company D, but the weight issue did not disappear. Through the winter of 1943 and spring of 1944, as the division trained for the invasion, Ezra's weight remained a constant topic. Officers questioned his fitness. Other soldiers made jokes. Medical boards reviewed his status. Ezra gained 10 pounds on British rations. By March 1944, he weighed 240 pounds. Lieutenant Ashford renewed his recommendation for transfer. He's getting fatter, not fitter. He's a liability. Dr. Whitmore blocked the transfer again, but the tension remained. The night before D-Day, June 5, 1944, Lieutenant Ashford called Ezra into his tent. "Tomorrow we hit the beach," Ashford said, "Dog Green sector. Intelligence says it'll be rough, heavy resistance. You understand what that means?" "Yes, sir," Ezra said. "You're going to be slow getting off that boat," Ashford said. "You're going to be slow crossing that beach. Your weight is going to get you killed, probably get other men killed trying to help you. You understand that?" Ezra met Ashford's eyes. "Sir, I'll do my duty. I'll do what needs to be done. My weight won't stop me." "Your weight is all that matters, Sergeant. Everything else is just you trying to prove something. Improving things gets men killed." Ashford dismissed him. Ezra walked back to his barracks where 57 other soldiers were trying to sleep before the invasion. One of them was Private Calvin Merritt, 19 years old, 140 pounds, the youngest man in the company. Calvin couldn't sleep. He sat on his bunk cleaning his rifle for the fourth time that night. "You scared?" Calvin asked when Ezra passed. "Yes," Ezra said. "They say you're too fat for combat," Calvin said. "That's true." Ezra sat down on his own bunk across from Calvin. "Charts say I'm unfit," Ezra said. "Officers say I'm a liability. Medical boards say I'm overweight. All of that's true according to regulations." "But are you fit?" Calvin asked. Ezra thought about 14 years in Tennessee woods, about 520-yard shots in the snow, about 90-pound cotton sacks carried through 12-hour days, about keeping his family alive through precision and labor. "I can do the work," Ezra said. "Whether they believe it or not, I can do what needs to be done." Calvin nodded. "Good, because I'm scared and I figure if they're wrong about you being too fat, maybe I can stick close and make it through this." Ezra looked at the 19-year-old boy cleaning his rifle with shaking hands. "You stick close," Ezra said. "I'll get you through." At 0200 hours on June 6, 1944, the company boarded landing craft. At 0630, they would hit Omaha Beach. Ezra Thornton Briggs, the fattest soldier in the battalion, the man they said was too unfit for combat, checked his rifle one final time. He had 120 rounds of ammunition, 12 grenades, 70 pounds of equipment, and 14 years of training in making every shot count when missing meant real consequences. The landing craft engines roared to life. The invasion of France began. Within 6 hours, Ezra would prove that weight charts measure weight, not capability. That assumptions about limitations often reflect prejudice more than reality. That sometimes the soldier everyone doubts proves to be exactly the warrior the moment requires. But first he had to survive the beach. The landing craft ramp dropped at exactly 0632 hours. German machine gun fire swept across the opening before the ramp touched water. The first 6 men out were cut down instantly. Bodies fell into the surf. Blood mixed with seawater. The men behind them froze. Ezra Briggs was positioned in the middle of the craft. He watched the men ahead of him die. Watched them fall forward into water already churning with bullets. The beach beyond was 200 yards of open sand swept by continuous fire from elevated positions. Every tactical training scenario said to exit the craft quickly, get to cover, move fast. But the men who had moved fast were dead. Ezra jumped off the side of the landing craft instead of going down the ramp. Went into shoulder-deep water, 20 feet from the killing zone of the ramp exit. The water was so cold it stopped his breath. 70 pounds of equipment immediately pulled him under. Rifle ammunition, grenades, rations, entrenching tool. Standard infantry load. The weight that had gotten him, called too fat for combat, was now compounded by 70 additional pounds dragging him toward the bottom. Ezra's boots touched sand 8 feet below the surface. And this was where the weight saved him. 230 pounds of body mass plus 70 pounds of equipment gave him 400 pounds pushing against the seafloor. Lighter men equally weighted by gear could not generate enough force to push back to the surface. They drowned in 8 feet of water, 20 yards from the beach. Ezra pushed off hard. His legs, strengthened by 20 years of farm labor, drove him upward through the water. He broke surface, gasped, air went under again. Pushed off again. Surfaced. This time he kept his head above water. Machine gun fire churned the surface around him. Bullets created white geysers. Artillery shells exploded in the surf, throwing water and sand 30 feet into the air. Men screamed. Men died. The chaos was absolute. Ezra waded forward. Each step was a battle against current, against weight, against the bullets tearing through the water. He kept his rifle above his head, kept moving. Behind him he heard more landing craft hitting the beach, heard more ramps dropping, heard more men dying. He reached the beach at 0642, crawled behind a steel beach obstacle, the only cover available. Machine gun fire ricocheted off the steel. Artillery continued to rain down. Ezra looked back at the water. Company D had landed 197 men. In 12 minutes, 96 of them were dead or wounded. Bodies floated in the surf. Wounded men crawled through shallow water. The living huddled behind obstacles, unable to advance, unable to retreat. The carefully planned invasion was disintegrating into massacre. Ezra scanned the beach defenses, identified the nearest German position. A concrete bunker approximately 200 yards up the beach, 50 yards inland. The bunker's MG-42 machine gun was firing parallel to the waterline, sweeping any movement. Every soldier who had tried to advance toward it had died. The bunker had to be eliminated. But reaching it meant crossing 200 yards of open beach under fire from multiple positions. Ezra started crawling. He moved from obstacle to obstacle, shell crater to shell crater, used every depression in the sand, every piece of wreckage. When machine gun fire swept toward him, he froze. When attention shifted elsewhere, he moved. 30 minutes to cross 200 yards. At 0712, he reached a disabled Sherman tank approximately 30 yards from the bunker. From this position, he could see the bunker's firing slit, could see the machine gun barrel protruding, sweeping back and forth across the beach. Ezra pulled a grenade from his harness, calculated the distance, 30 yards, accounted for the angle for the small opening of the firing slit, waited for the machine gun to point away from his position. Threw. The grenade arced through the morning air, dropped through the firing slit. 3 seconds later, the explosion inside the concrete bunker was devastating. The machine gun fell silent. The position was eliminated. Ezra did not wait. Moved immediately to the next nearest German position, a trench line 70 yards up the beach. By 0800 hours, Ezra had eliminated 4 German positions, 12 confirmed German soldiers killed, 3 with the bunker grenade, 4 in the first trench, 3 in a second bunker, 2 more in a fighting position near the base of the bluffs. Other American soldiers, seeing that movement was possible, began to advance. Small groups coordinated attacks. The massacre was becoming a battle. At 0745, Ezra found Lieutenant Garrett Ashford. Ashford was behind a beach obstacle, wounded, shrapnel in his left leg, unable to walk. 2 men from the company were with him, trying to stop the bleeding. Ashford looked up as Ezra reached the position. Recognition showed in his eyes. Then something else. Shame, maybe. Or respect. "Briggs," Ashford said through gritted teeth, "you made it." "Yes, sir. I was wrong about you, about the weight, about everything." Ezra said nothing. He checked Ashford's wound. The shrapnel had torn through the thigh muscle but missed the artery. Painful but survivable. "Can you walk, sir?" Ezra asked. "No, you need to leave me. Get up those bluffs. That's where the fight is." "Need to get you to the medics first," Ezra said. He lifted Ashford onto his shoulders. 230 pounds of body weight, 70 pounds of equipment, 100 to 60 pounds of wounded officer. 550 pounds total. Ezra carried him 50 yards back to where medics had established an aid station behind a seawall. "You're unstoppable," Ashford said as Ezra set him down. "I watched you eliminate those positions. I've never seen anything like it." "Just doing what needs to be done, sir," Ezra said. He turned and headed back toward the bluffs. Pause the cost of killing. Ezra crouched behind a destroyed Higgins boat at 0815 hours and conducted an inventory. Ammunition, 60 rounds remaining. Started with 120, used 60 in the first hour and 45 minutes. Grenades, 6 remaining. Started with 12, used 6. Physical condition. Minor shrapnel wound in right shoulder. Bullet graze across helmet that he had not noticed until now. Otherwise intact. Mental condition, functioning. But something was wrong in his head. A disconnect. He had killed 12 men in the last hour, felt nothing about it. No remorse, no satisfaction. Just a mechanical awareness that 12 German soldiers were dead by his hand. 50 yards to his left, Private Calvin Merritt was pinned behind a steel obstacle. The 19-year-old was crying, paralyzed by fear. Machine gun fire swept across his position every few seconds. Ezra crawled to him. "Calvin," Ezra said, "look at me." Calvin's eyes were wide with terror. "I can't move," Calvin said. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can. Stay with me. We're going up that bluff. Together." "I'm going to die here." "Not if you stick with me," Ezra said. "I told you last night I'd get you through. I keep my word." Calvin nodded, still terrified, but he moved when Ezra moved. At 08:22, Ezra passed a dead German soldier, early 20s, killed by artillery, not by Ezra. The body was intact except for the shrapnel wounds. A photograph had fallen from the German's pocket. Ezra picked it up without thinking. The photograph showed the soldier with a woman and two small children. A family. Wife and children, most likely. The German had been carrying this photograph into combat. Ezra looked at the dead man's face, looked at the photograph, looked back at the face. He vomited into the sand. 12 men dead by his hand. How many of them had families? How many had photographs in their pockets? How many were someone's husband, someone's father, someone's son? The tactical part of Ezra's mind said it did not matter. They were the enemy. They were trying to kill American soldiers. Killing them was necessary, justified, required. But another part of his mind, the part that had grown up in a Tennessee sharecropper's cabin where every life mattered because resources were scarce, could not reconcile 12 dead men with no emotional response. He wiped his mouth, put the photograph back in the dead German's pocket, picked up his rifle and continued up the beach. There was still work to do. Feelings could wait. Phase 2. The bluffs. By 0900 hours, the American forces had established a foothold at the base of the bluffs. The beach was no longer a massacre. It was a battle. Men were advancing, eliminating German positions, pushing inland. Ezra led a squad of 8 men up the bluffs. The terrain was steep, rocky, covered with obstacles and mines. German defenders held elevated positions with clear fields of fire. But the defenders were now fighting soldiers who had survived the beach, men who had walked through hell and decided that dying while advancing was better than dying while pinned down. Ezra's approach was methodical. Identify German position, determine best angle of attack, use grenades or rifle fire depending on range and cover, eliminate the position, move to the next one. At 0920, he eliminated a bunker position with 2 grenades, 8 Germans killed. At 0945, he led an assault on a trench system, close quarters fighting, rifle fire at ranges of 10 to 30 yards. 11 Germans killed, 2 Americans wounded but alive. At 10:15, he used his M1 Garand to engage a German sniper position at 380 yards. The range was familiar. 8-inch squirrel at 320 yards in Tennessee woods, 18-inch human torso at 380 yards on a French bluff. The math was simple. The M1 Garand was semi-automatic, 8-round en-bloc clip, effective range 500 yards. Ezra kept his shots under 400 because that was the range where he knew from 14 years of necessity shooting that he could guarantee first shot kills. The sniper fell, 4 Germans in that position total. At 11:10, Ezra engaged an artillery crew repositioning their gun. Long-range rifle fire. 3 Germans killed at ranges between 300 and 400 yards. By noon, Ezra had personally killed 38 German soldiers. The squad he led had accounted for 20 more. The bluffs were being cleared. The invasion was succeeding. A company runner found Ezra at 12:05. Sergeant Briggs battalion commander wants to know who's leading this assault. Says someone is systematically eliminating every German position in this sector. Just doing the work, Ezra said. Sir, you're the most effective soldier on this beach. Command wants to know if you need support. Ezra looked up the bluffs. More German positions remained. The village of Vierville was a mile inland, fortified and defended. Tell command we're continuing to advance, Ezra said. Send ammunition and grenades. We're running low. The runner left. Ezra checked his remaining ammunition. 22 rounds. 2 grenades. Resupply arrived 15 minutes later. Ezra reloaded. 120 rounds. 12 grenades. Same loadout he had started with. Calvin Merritt was still with him, still alive. The 19-year-old had killed 3 Germans himself. Was no longer crying, was functioning. You doing all right? Ezra asked. I thought I was going to die, Calvin said. On the beach, I was sure of it. You're still here, Ezra said. That's what matters. Keep moving. Stay focused. We're not done yet. At 1300 hours, the American forces controlled the bluffs. The immediate threat to the beach was eliminated. Landing craft could bring in reinforcements and supplies without being slaughtered. But the mission was not complete. Vierville had to be taken. The village controlled the roads leading inland from the beach. German forces held it in strength. Ezra's squad was assigned to the assault. Pause the young soldier. The advance to Vierville required crossing open farmland under German observation. Previous attacks had been repulsed with heavy casualties. At 1340 hours, Ezra's squad entered a farm building on the outskirts of the village, clearing it room by room. Ezra kicked open a door, found a wounded German soldier inside. The German was 18 years old, maybe younger, shot through the stomach, dying. He was crying curled in a corner of the room. "Mutter," the German said. "Mutter bitte." "Mother, please." The German saw Ezra, reach for his pistol on the floor 3 feet away. Ezra could have let him bleed out, could have called for medics to take him prisoner, could have walked away, but the German's hand was moving toward the pistol. And in combat, you do not give the enemy chances. Ezra shot him. The German stopped moving, stopped crying. 18 years old, calling for his mother. Dead. Ezra stood in the doorway looking at the body. The boy had been someone's son, had probably been drafted, had probably not wanted to be in this war any more than Ezra wanted to be in it, had been following orders, same as Ezra was following orders. And now he was dead because Ezra had pulled a trigger. "He was just a kid," Calvin said from behind Ezra, "younger than me." "Yes," Ezra said. "Did you have to shoot him?" "He was reaching for his weapon." "Yes, I had to." "Does it bother you?" Calvin asked. "Killing them?" Ezra looked at the dead 18-year-old German soldier. "I don't know yet," Ezra said. "Right now, I'm just trying to survive. Ask me again when the war is over." He stepped over the body and continued clearing the building. War did not care about age, did not care about who wanted to be there and who did not. War only cared about who lived and who died. And Ezra intended to live, even if that meant killing boys who cried for their mothers. Phase 3, Vierville. The assault on Vierville began at 1420 hours. Ezra led his squad through a flanking approach using a sunken road the German defenders were not watching carefully. Advanced 500 meters without contact. Reached the village's eastern edge where defenses were lightest. Simultaneous assault on multiple buildings. Grenades through windows. Immediate entry while defenders were stunned. First building, 3 Germans killed. Rifle fire at close range distances of 5 to 15 feet. Second building, 4 Germans killed. Grenade through a ventilation hole, then covering the exit as survivors tried to escape. Third building, 2 Germans killed. Close quarters combat in a stone barn. Fourth building, 3 Germans killed. Ambush from second floor position. Fifth building, 2 Germans killed. Final resistance in what had been a church. By 1600 hours, the village's eastern edge was cleared. 14 Germans killed in 2 hours. Ezra's squad had broken the German defensive line. American forces advancing from the beach pushed through the gap. At 1630, German commanders ordered withdrawal. Their positions were compromised. Staying meant being surrounded. The withdrawal was organized but exposed. German soldiers moved across open ground toward fallback positions 2 kilometers inland. Ezra positioned his squad to engage the withdrawal. 200 yards range. Clear fields of fire. For 30 minutes from 1630 to 1700, Ezra fired at withdrawing German soldiers. Each shot aimed carefully. Each shot finding its target. Marksmanship honed over 14 years of necessity hunting. 9 Germans killed during the withdrawal. By 1800 hours, Vierville was secured. German forces had withdrawn. American forces controlled the village and the roads leading inland. Ezra conducted another inventory. Kills today, 61 confirmed. 12 on the beach, 26 on the bluffs, 14 in the village. 9 during the withdrawal. Ammunition remaining, 43 rounds. Grenades remaining. 3. Physical condition. Shrapnel wound in shoulder, now bleeding through his uniform. Exhausted but functional. The work was not finished. Intelligence reported German forces preparing counterattacks. They would try to retake the village under cover of darkness, push the Americans back to the beach. Ezra's squad was assigned to hold the southern edge of the village, the direction German attacks were expected from. Night was falling. The longest day of Ezra Briggs's life was not yet over. The German counterattacks began at 1900 hours. 100 soldiers from the 352nd Infantry Division, artillery support, machine gun coverage. A serious attempt to retake Vierville. Ezra's position came under immediate assault. German soldiers advanced to within 50 yards before American defenders opened fire. Close-range firefight. Intense. Confused. Both sides using grenades. Fighting in gathering darkness where identifying targets was difficult. Ezra positioned at a second-floor window with good fields of fire. The M1 Garand's semi-automatic capability allowed rapid, accurate shooting. 3 Germans killed in the initial assault, 4 more as they tried to regroup, 2 more as they withdrew. The first counterattack broke. 25 German casualties. They had not breached American positions. The second counterattack came at 20-30 hours. Larger, 200 men, better coordinated. This attack achieved more success. German soldiers reached American positions. Close quarters fighting. Buildings changing hands. Ezra's building was assaulted by approximately 30 Germans. Grenades through windows. Rush assault. Room-to-room fighting. Rifle fire at distances measured in feet. 4 Germans killed on the ground floor. 3 more on the second floor. The Americans held. Barely. Third counterattack at 2200 hours. Fourth at 2330 hours. Each attack was repulsed. Each attack cost American and German casualties. Each attack added to Ezra's count. The final confirmed kills of June 6th came at approximately 2340 hours. A German squad attempted to infiltrate American positions using darkness for concealment. Ezra detected them through sound, bootsteps on cobblestone, low voices giving orders in German, waited until they were within 30 yards, threw 4 grenades in rapid succession, followed with rifle fire. 8 Germans killed or wounded. At midnight on June 6, 1944, the German counterattack ceased. German commanders recognized they could not dislodge American forces. The invasion had succeeded. The beaches were secure. D-Day was over. Ezra Briggs sat in a second-floor room in Vierville surrounded by empty shell casings and the smell of cordite. 76 confirmed German soldiers killed. Witnesses had counted, officers had verified, bodies had been documented. 76 men dead by Ezra's hand in 18 hours. The fat sergeant, the soldier they said was too unfit for combat, the liability. He had killed more enemy combatants on D-Day than any other American soldier. And in 7 days, he would have to explain to a court of inquiry whether 76 kills was justified or excessive. But for now, he just sat in the darkness and tried not to think about the 18-year-old German crying for his mother. Consequences. June 7th, 1944. 0900 hours. A tent behind the lines 2 kilometers inland from Omaha Beach. Ezra Thornton Briggs stood at attention before a table where 3 officers sat reviewing documents. A court of inquiry. Not a trial. Not yet. But an investigation into whether the actions of Sergeant Briggs on D-Day constituted appropriate use of force or something else. The senior officer was a colonel Ezra did not recognize. Gray-haired, combat infantry badge from the previous war. The kind of officer who had seen enough killing to know when something was unusual. Sergeant Briggs, the colonel said, "We have reports from multiple witnesses placing your confirmed kill count at 76 enemy combatants in an 18-hour period. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir," Ezra said. 76, the colonel repeated. He looked at the documents in front of him. That's more than any other soldier in this division. More than most soldiers achieve in an entire war. How do you account for that number? Ezra considered the question. How do you explain 14 years of necessity hunting to men who learned to shoot on rifle ranges? How do you explain that precision under pressure was not exceptional for him, just required? "Sir, there were targets. I engaged them. They were shooting at American soldiers. I shot back." At what point, one of the other officers asked, "Did you consider that 76 kills might be excessive?" The question hung in the air, excessive. As if there was a quota, a reasonable number of enemy soldiers to kill before it became unreasonable. "Sir, I don't understand the question," Ezra said. "They were armed enemy combatants attempting to kill American forces. Rules of engagement authorize lethal force against armed enemy in combat. I followed rules of engagement." The colonel leaned forward. "Sergeant, we're not questioning whether each individual engagement was justified. We're questioning whether the cumulative total suggests something beyond normal combat operations. 76 kills in 18 hours requires explanation." Ezra understood what they were really asking. Was he out of control? Was he killing for reasons beyond tactical necessity? Had combat turned him into something dangerous that needed to be managed? "Sir, permission to speak freely." "Granted. Before yesterday, officers in this division called me too fat for combat, said my weight made me a liability. Recommended I be assigned to supply duties. You can check my file, sir. It's all documented. Now you're asking if I was too effective in combat. I did my duty. I killed enemy soldiers who were trying to kill American soldiers. If that's excessive, then the problem is with how you measure effectiveness, not with what I did on that beach. Silence in the tent. The colonel reviewed the documents again. Witness statements, Lieutenant Garrett Ashford's report specifically noting that Sergeant Briggs had saved his life and led the most successful assault on Vierville. Calvin Merritt's statement that Briggs had kept him alive through the entire day. Tactical assessments from company and battalion commanders. We have no evidence, the colonel finally said, of any violation of rules of engagement. Every documented kill was defensive or offensive action against armed enemy combatants. Your marksmanship is extraordinary. Your tactical decisions were sound. Your courage under fire is beyond question. He closed the folder. This inquiry is concluded. Your return to duty, Sergeant Briggs, and for what it's worth, your weight, had nothing to do with your effectiveness. The officers who recommended your reassignment were wrong. Ezra saluted, turned to leave. Sergeant, the colonel called after him, 76 men. You'll carry that the rest of your life. Make sure you find someone to talk to about it. Don't try to carry it alone. Yes, sir, Ezra said. But he knew he would carry it alone. That was what men like him did. 3 weeks later, on June 28, 1944, Ezra stood in formation with the rest of Company D, while a brigadier general pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to his uniform. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in combat operations on June 6, 1944, during the assault on Omaha Beach and subsequent operations. Sergeant Briggs displayed exceptional courage, tactical acumen, and combat effectiveness in the face of overwhelming enemy fire. His actions were instrumental in the successful completion of D-Day objectives." The general shook Ezra's hand. Photographers took pictures. Other soldiers applauded. The ceremony was awkward. The general's voice had a quality to it that Ezra recognized. The quality of a man saying words that were true but uncomfortable. "Sergeant Briggs," the general said quietly, "your record noted concerns about your physical fitness, your weight. I want you to know that your performance on D-Day has put those concerns to rest." "Thank you, sir," Ezra said. However, the general continued, and Ezra heard the shift in tone. "Medical officers still recommend you lose weight for long-term health reasons. The decoration doesn't change fitness standards." Ezra understood. He had killed 76 Germans, had proven every assumption wrong, had demonstrated that weight charts measured weight, not capability. And still his fitness report would note exceeds weight standards. Recommend continued monitoring. The bureaucracy could not adapt, could not acknowledge that its metrics had failed, could only maintain its procedures and regulations while pinning medals on the men those regulations had called unfit. Dr. Silas Whitmore found Ezra after the ceremony. "I wrote a report," Whitmore said, "recommended the Army revise its weight standards to account for functional strength and body composition instead of simple height-weight ratios. Sent it up the chain of command." "What happened to it?" Ezra asked. "Filed and forgotten," Whitmore said. "The system doesn't like admitting it's wrong. Easier to call you an exception than to change the rules." Ezra looked at the medal on his chest. Second highest decoration the Army could award. Proof of exceptional performance. His fitness report still said he was too fat. "Thank you for trying, sir," Ezra said. "You proved them all wrong, Sergeant. Remember that. Whatever else happens, you proved them wrong." War continues. The war did not end on D-Day. It continued through France into Belgium, through winter into Germany. Ezra Briggs continued fighting. Normandy campaign, July through August 1944. 15 confirmed kills. Hedgerow fighting. Small unit combat. Methodical clearing of German positions. Hurtgen Forest. September through November 1944. 18 confirmed kills. Dense woods. Limited visibility. Combat at ranges under 100 yards. Rhine crossing, March 1945. 10 confirmed kills. River assault operations. Supporting fire from defensive positions. Total additional kills from June 7, 1944 through May 8, 1945. 43 confirmed. Combined with the 76 from D-Day, 119 confirmed enemy combatants killed by Ezra Thornton Briggs during World War II. He was wounded twice. August 14, 1944. Shrapnel from artillery. Shoulder and back. Evacuated to field hospital. Returned to duty against medical advice after 2 weeks. December 23, 1944. Bullet grazed left leg. Refused evacuation. Field medic bandaged it. Ezra continued fighting. Both times officers suggested he take extended recovery. Both times Ezra returned to his unit. "My boys need me," he told the doctors. "They kept me alive this long." I keep them alive. That's the deal. Calvin Merritt was one of those boys, the 19-year-old private who had been terrified on the landing craft, who had stuck close to Ezra through D-Day and survived. Calvin made it through Normandy, made it through France, made it through the Hürtgen Forest. On January 15, 1945, in a village in Germany whose name Ezra would never remember, a German sniper shot Calvin Merritt through the chest. Ezra reached him within seconds, applied pressure to the wound, called for medics, did everything right. Calvin looked up at him with eyes that knew he was dying. "Tell my ma," Calvin said. "Tell her I wasn't scared. Not with you there." "Which you're going to tell her yourself," Ezra said. "You're going to make it. Stay with me." "I was scared on the beach," Calvin said, blood in his mouth now. "But you got me through 7 months. That's pretty good." 7 months isn't enough," Ezra said. "You're going home. You're going to see your ma. You're going to tell her yourself." But Calvin's eyes were already losing focus. "Thank you," Calvin said, "for keeping your word." He died in Ezra's arms at 14:37 hours, 19 years old, 7 months after D-Day. Ezra sat in the snow holding Calvin's body while medics arrived, while his squad moved on, while the war continued around him. He had kept 76 German soldiers from going home, had stopped 119 enemy combatants from seeing their families again, and he could not keep one 19-year-old American boy alive. The guilt settled on him like winter cold, deep, pervasive, permanent. Return May 1946, Rowan County, Tennessee. Ezra Briggs returned to the sharecropper's cabin where he had grown up. His father was older now. His mother had died in 1943 while Ezra was training in England. His siblings had moved away. The cabin was the same. The cotton fields were the same. The debt was gone, paid off years ago, but the poverty remained. Ezra's wife Judith was waiting. They had married in 1940 before the war. As she was 31 now, the same age Ezra had been when he enlisted. She had waited 4 years, had written letters Ezra rarely answered, had hoped and prayed and worked the farm alone. When Ezra stepped off the bus in town, she was there. They looked at each other across 20 feet of dirt road. 4 years of war between them. 4 years of change that could not be explained or understood by someone who had not lived it. Judith walked to him, put her arms around him, held him. "You're home," she said. "Yes," Ezra said. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Ezra lied. That night, lying in bed in the cabin, Judith asked about the war. "Were you at D-Day? The invasion everyone talks about." "Yes." "What was it like?" Ezra stared at the ceiling, saw the beach, saw the water, saw 76 faces, saw Calvin dying in the snow. "I was there," he said. "I did my duty. That's all you need to know." "Did you get any medals or anything?" The Distinguished Service Cross was in his duffel bag. He had not unpacked it, did not plan to. "Nothing important," he said. Judith did not ask again. She learned as Ezra's father and siblings learned that the war was not a topic Ezra would discuss. He went back to farm work, picked cotton, repaired fences, did the same work he had done before the war. Neighbors who knew he had served sometimes asked questions. "What did you do in the war, Ezra? Were you in any battles?" "I was a soldier," Ezra would say. "Did what soldiers do. Nothing special." The nightmare started in June 1946. Every night of June 6th, Ezra woke up screaming. Judith held him, did not ask what he was seeing, just held him until the shaking stopped. The nightmares were always the same. The 18-year-old German soldier, the boy crying for his mother. The moment Ezra pulled the trigger, sometimes there were other faces, other Germans, Calvin, the men from Company D who had not made it off the beach. But mostly it was the boy. "Mutter," the boy said in the dream. "Mutter bitte." And Ezra shot him, every night, every June 6th for the rest of his life. Judith learned not to wake him during the nightmares, learned to just be there when he woke up, learned that asking about them made it worse. Ezra and Judith had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, born in 1946, 1949, and 1952. The children knew their father had been in the war, knew he had been a soldier. That was all they knew. The Distinguished Service Cross stayed in a trunk in the attic. The citation, the photographs from the ceremony, the letters from battalion commanders praising his effectiveness, all of it locked away, hidden. Ezra worked the farm, raised his children, attended church, lived a quiet life. He never talked about D-Day, never mentioned the 76 kills, never said he was a decorated veteran. To his community, he was just Ezra Briggs, farmer, father, veteran who had served and come home. The extraordinary day when he had proven everyone wrong was known only to him and to the men who had fought beside him. Discovery. Summer 1973. Ezra's oldest son Leander was 27 years old, married, working as a mechanic in town. He came to the farm on Sunday afternoons to help with repairs. One Sunday in July, Leander was in the attic looking for old tools. Found a trunk he had never seen opened. The trunk was not locked. Leander opened it. Inside a military uniform, a medal with a blue ribbon. Documents, photographs. Leander picked up the medal. Distinguished Service Cross. The name on the citation, Ezra Thornton Briggs. He read the citation. Extraordinary heroism. June 6, 1944. Omaha Beach. Exceptional courage. Combat effectiveness. Read the after-action reports. Sergeant Briggs personally eliminated 76 enemy combatants. Most effective soldier in the division. Instrumental in securing objectives. Leander sat in the attic reading documents about a father he thought he knew. A quiet farmer who never talked about the war. 76 enemy combatants. The Distinguished Service Cross. Omaha Beach. Ezra found him 2 hours later, came up to the attic and saw Leander sitting among the documents. They looked at each other. Father and son, 63 and 27. Between them, a trunk full of secrets. Dad, Leander said, is this real? Did you really 76? Ezra stood in the doorway, did not enter, did not reach for the documents. That was war, Ezra said. Different man, different time. Don't want to remember him. But you're a hero, the medal, the reports. Why didn't you ever tell us? Because heroes, Ezra said, are the boys who didn't come home, the ones who died on that beach, the ones who died in the snow. I just lived. That's not heroism. That's luck. Dad, you killed 76 enemy soldiers. You saved lives. You won the second highest medal the Army gives. How is that not heroism? Ezra looked at his son, at the medal in Leander's hands, at the life he had built for 27 years without that medal defining him. I killed 76 men, Ezra said. Some of them were enemy soldiers trying to kill Americans. Some of them were boys 18 years old calling for their mothers. All of them had families. All of them died because I pulled a trigger. You want to call that heroism? That's your choice. I call it what I had to do to survive. And surviving meant coming home and being a father to you. That's the real work. That's what matters. He turned to leave. Dad, Leander called after him, I'm proud of you for what you did, for who you are. Ezra stopped, turned back. Then be proud of the man who raised you, not the man who killed 76 Germans. Those are different men. And the first one matters more than the second. He left Leander in the attic with the trunk full of a war that Ezra had spent 27 years trying to forget. Legacy. Ezra Thornton Briggs died on March 12, 1998. He was 88 years old. The obituary in the Rowan County newspaper was 4 paragraphs long. Ezra Thornton Briggs, 88, of Rowan County, died Tuesday at Johnson City Medical Center. He was a lifelong resident of the county and worked as a farmer. He was a member of First Baptist Church. Mr. Briggs was a World War II veteran who served in the European theater. He survived the D-Day invasion and in the Battle of the Bulge. He was preceded in death by his wife Judith and is survived by 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. Funeral services will be held Friday at First Baptist Church. No mention of 76 kills, no mention of the Distinguished Service Cross, no mention that he had been the most effective soldier on Omaha Beach. Just World War II veteran. Survived D-Day. The funeral was held on a Friday afternoon in March. 140 people attended. Family, friends, neighbors, church members. At the service, Leander stood to speak about his father. Most of you knew my dad as a farmer, Leander said. A quiet man, a good man, a man who worked hard and raised his family and never asked for recognition. He paused, looked at the casket. What most of you didn't know is that my father was a hero. Not because he wanted to be, because he had to be. Leander told the story. D-Day, Omaha Beach, 76 confirmed kills. The Distinguished Service Cross hidden in a trunk for 27 years. The congregation sat in silence as Leander described a man they thought they knew doing things they could not imagine. After the war, Leander said, my father never talked about what he did, never displayed his medal, never claimed to be anything special. He came home and he farmed and he raised us and he lived a quiet life. When I found his medal and asked him about it, he told me that the real heroes were the boys who didn't come home, that surviving didn't make him special, that being a father was more important than being a soldier. Leander's voice cracked. My father taught me that living takes more courage than dying, that coming home and being a father and facing what you did in the war, that's the real battle. And he won that battle. Every day for 52 years, he won that battle. After the funeral, people approached Leander. Veterans who had known Ezra was at D-Day, but not what he had done. Neighbors who had lived next to him for decades without knowing. Friends who had eaten at his table not knowing that the quiet farmer had killed more enemy combatants on D-Day than any other American soldier. Why didn't he tell anyone, they asked. Because Leander said he didn't think it mattered. He thought who he was as a father mattered more than who he was as a soldier. And maybe he was right. 5 years later, in 2003, the state of Tennessee named a stretch of rural highway after Ezra Thornton Briggs. A small sign marked the designation, Ezra T. Briggs Memorial Highway, World War II veteran. No statue, no museum, no grand memorial. Just a sign on a quiet country road, the kind of modest recognition that Ezra would have appreciated. The military history community knows the story now. D-Day historians cite Ezra Briggs as the most effective soldier on Omaha Beach. Training courses use his story as an example of how regulations can fail to account for individual capability. But in Rowan County, Tennessee, where Ezra lived for 88 years, he is remembered as a farmer, a father, a man who survived war and came home and did the harder work of living with what he had done. The trunk with the Distinguished Service Cross is in a museum now, donated by the family. People can see the medal, read the citation. Look at photographs of a young sergeant who weighed 230 pounds and killed 76 Germans in 18 hours. But the real legacy is not in a museum. It is in the 3 children Ezra raised, the 8 grandchildren, the 4 great-grandchildren. The family he built after war tried to destroy him. It is in the quiet example of a man who proved that weight charts measure weight, not worth, that assumptions about limitations often reflect prejudice more than reality, that sometimes the person everyone doubts becomes exactly who the moment requires. And most importantly, in the lesson that Leander shared at his father's funeral, living takes more courage than dying. Coming home, being a father, facing what you did, that is the real battle. Ezra Thornton Briggs won that battle. They called him too fat for the front lines. He killed 76 Germans on D-Day and proved them wrong. But his real victory was the 52 years after the war. The years he spent being a father instead of a soldier. The years he spent living instead of just surviving. That is the legacy of the unfit soldier. Not 76 kills, but a life well lived in spite of them. And in the end, that mattered more than any medal.